Hello there, you're watching the press preview, a first look at what is on the front pages as they arrive. And it's time to see what is making the headlines with the political editor of the Liverpool Echo, Liam Thorp, and Anita Boateng, former Conservative Special Advisor and broadcaster. They're going to be with us from now until just before midnight. Welcome to you both and thank you both very much for joining us. So let's see what is on the front of some of those front pages. The murder of 9-year-old Olivia Pratt-Corbell is, of course, the lead for the Liverpool Echo once again. It shows her with two of her best friends and a message from the community. We stand together. The Metro goes with this promise from the murdered girl's family. We will get justice for our Liv. The Sun reports that the only man arrested so far in connection with the killing is refusing to help police. Their headline, for the sake of little Olivia, talk. The Telegraph has comments about the cost of the war in Ukraine, from Boris Johnson's visit to the country, where paying higher bills, Ukraine is paying in blood. That story is also the lead in the Daily Express. On the subject of energy bills, the Mirror carries this message from the people of Britain: freeze our bills now. The Financial Times leads with the energy cost crisis and its effect on businesses as they face a fourfold increase in bills this autumn. Back in Ukraine, The Guardian leads with a warning of a catastrophe at the Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant because of Russia's plan to disconnect it from the national power grid, which experts say could damage its cooling system. The Eye claims an exclusive with news of money troubles in the Labour Party. Keir Starmer apparently telling his shadow cabinet to stop fundraising for their own officers to combat what it calls Labour's cash woes. Whilst the Times reports on alarm in the NHS over Liz Truss's plan, if she becomes Prime Minister, to divert £10 billion a year into social care. The Mail has news of a new plan by the Home Secretary to send illegal migrants from Albania back to Albania. And after the heatwave, The Star has news of storms to come with the headline, a hard rain's gonna fall. And a reminder that by scanning the QR code that you can see on screen during the programme, you can check out the front pages of tomorrow's papers while you watch with us. And as we said, we've been joined tonight by the political editor of the Liverpool Echo, Liam Thorp, and Anita Boateng, broadcaster and former Conservative Special Advisor. Liam, let's turn to you first and Liverpool Echo. It has, of course, been still the lead story exactly 2 days after this happened. This poor girl who's lost her life and her poor family. An easy, lead for you, a very obvious lead. What has the public reaction been like there in Liverpool? I mean, we sense the shock and horror, but what is the feeling?
Yeah, I think people are still shell-shocked. I spent some time in the community close to where this horrendous event happened today, and people they still seem shell-shocked. They still seem to be trying to get their head around the reality of this. I spoke to people who live nearby who still haven't found the words to explain to their young children what's happened to Olivia, because how do you even start to explain that to a young child, that another young child has been shot dead inside her own home? And what we're trying to do with this front page really is show that the vast majority of the city of Liverpool is united in grief for Olivia, in anger at what's happened to her, and in its demand that people do come forward. Obviously we are still looking for this callous, this cold-blooded killer who was prepared to fire guns into a family home, prepared to leave a 9-year-old girl dying as they ran away. There have obviously been some movements with the case today, but the crucial thing here is finding the person who shot this young girl and bringing them to justice. And we've brought together a whole range of people from across the city: footballers, Jamie Carragher, former Everton player Peter Reid, politicians, councillors, other celebrities, who are all speaking with one voice now and saying, look, any kind of misguided sense of loyalty between criminals needs to go. This crosses every single line that you could ever imagine, and people need to drop whatever those kind of pretenses are and come forward and get justice for this little girl and her family who have gone through something just unimaginable.
Absolutely. And Anita, if we move on to the Metro, we will get justice for our Liv, is their headline. And Liam touched on it, this idea that there's a great deal of pressure on anybody who knows anything about this to come forward. The problem is for the authorities, isn't it, that people are scared to come forward. People are scared of repercussions if they do come forward.
Yes, and we can see from the details that we do know about this incident, and obviously the use of guns, that there are some suspicions that this is to do with some kind of gang conflict or perhaps to do with drugs. This is a very serious and devastating crime for the family, but will have huge repercussions across the community. And I can understand why people may be hesitant to come forward, but as a community, it feels as though Liverpool is reeling, and some people coming forward will send a really important signal of support, I think, to the whole family and provide that kind of reassurance that Liverpool is safe. I mean, this is such a senseless and deeply wounding and shocking crime that, with the victim being, a 9-year-old girl in her own home, that I'm hoping, and we're all hoping, that with that community support and with the activity of the police, that there are people that do come forward in order to ensure that the person responsible is held fully accountable.
Liam, you've been down there, as you say, in the community. The police have said that they have had names given to them from 2 different sources. Have people contacted the paper to say, we know who this is?
People do contact us very regularly with information. On this particular incident, I think people are scared, and people I spoke to today down at a community centre right next to where this happened, they have been providing an absolutely crucial resource, because they are encouraging people to come forward to them and to tell them, if they are scared, or perhaps in some cases they don't want to speak to the police for whatever reason, they're speaking to these local community figures who are then passing that information on to the police. I heard today from some of these community figures that normally when there are incidents or other crimes, that the WhatsApp groups and social media are kind of alive with chat, but this time that online there has been a kind of wall of silence, because people are scared and they don't want to put their name to something. But what they are able to do instead is pass it on through this community centre, which also has an anonymous tip-off box in there as well. And that is where police are getting absolutely vital information. And we were able to corroborate that line today, that the same name had been mentioned several times to these community figures and councillors. That's been passed to police, and that could be the thing that unlocks this case and that tracks this person down and begins the process of getting justice for Olivia. So vital work being done on the ground by community figures.
Let's move on from the front page of the Liverpool Echo to the front page of the Daily Mirror, and slight similarities between these two front pages, actually, and unusually. The Echo has got the composite images of people's faces at the bottom. The Mirror too has, but on a totally different story, which is quite unusual to see such similar images on papers, on different stories on the same day. Anita, this is about freezing our energy bills. We're going to get a figure, aren't we, this Friday about what the next price cap is going to be on this. It's a real worry, though, for people, isn't it, as winter approaches?
Absolutely. So this is the announcement of the price cap that's going to start in October. So I'm sure most people watching this are aware, but it's currently at £1,971. And there have been some very stark predictions from experts about how high this price cap could rise. One fairly renowned Cornwall Insights Institute put it at over £4,000. So tomorrow really is a very dramatic day for those for households, as we finally find out exactly how high the price cap could rise by October. And the Mirror tends to be Labour supporting Labour's proposal of essentially having the government attempt to pay the entire thing in order to absorb the cost that households will go over, the average cost. There are no good solutions. I've got to say, I'm pretty sceptical about the numbers that Labour have put forward about how this would be affordable. But nevertheless, I think there's a really, really tough autumn coming. And the one thing I think that this plan around price freezes for households doesn't address, which is the commercial cost. There are so many stories of, for instance, chip shops and small businesses that simply cannot fathom being able to stay afloat without additional support,
Well,
not
indeed.
to mention schools schools and public services.
Which brings us on very neatly to the Financial Times, Liam, and that is its front page, the cost of doing business crisis looming as company fuel bills rise fourfold. And I suppose a lot of people will say, oh, well, I'm not worried about what big companies have to pay for their energy bills. But as Anita points out, it's your local chip shop, isn't it? It's lots of smaller companies, and even the big ones. If they go out of business, what about the people who work for them? What about their jobs?
Yeah, we've got the Federation of Small Businesses quoted saying, urgent government intervention is needed right now. And I think, right, the big companies, the corporations, they'll survive. They'll take a hit, but they'll survive. It's your independent businesses, your cafes, your bars, your restaurants, your chip shops, your independent shops that, we could see a huge number of these businesses forced to close this winter unless urgent help is needed. If you look at the hospitality industry, for example, which has suffered more than any other really during the COVID crisis, they were the first to shut the longest. We've seen Sacha Lord, who's the Greater Manchester Nighttime Economy Advisor, talking about how those businesses that are just about trying to recover are now the ones again that could be hit. They're facing enormous costs. A lot of these businesses are due to renegotiate or restart new contracts in October, which just so happens to be the exact time when this price cap goes up. So it's a hugely worrying time, and I just feel like this Conservative leadership contest is just going on in a sort of parallel universe. We've got all these massive fears that are happening. We've got the price cap going up on Friday, and somehow this leadership contest is still ongoing, and we don't know what their plans are. We've not heard enough about what they're going to do for so many worried people and businesses.
This half, we're going to kick off with the Telegraph, Anita, and this is Boris Johnson's surprise visit today on Independence Day to Ukraine. And he's made it very clear that we have to stay the course with Ukraine, and that people back in the UK may feel the pinch this winter. They may struggle to heat their homes, but we must stay the course. He says, we also know if we're paying on our energy bills for the evils of Vladimir Putin, the people of Ukraine are paying with their blood.
Yes, some very strong words from the Prime Minister today. And I think, striking that important tone of defiance and making it clear, I think, that the UK will always stand with Ukraine. And it is worth saying that, the situation, regardless of essentially of our position and our support for Ukraine, the challenge around energy prices would exist due to this conflict in and of itself. So the resolve is really about the UK continuing to pledge its military support for the Ukraine, because Russia is always going to, in this climate, try to wage war with energy. And so I think that it's absolutely the right thing for the Prime Minister to show the UK's solidarity in the face of what is senseless and egregious violence. And now we're talking about 6 months into this invasion, with the Russia's offensive appearing to peter out. There's possibly some sort of moments of optimism in the midst of all this violence and death in the Ukraine. But I think it's really important that the Prime Minister, in one of his final acts, once again reinforces the UK's solidarity and close relationship with Ukraine. And
Liam, as well as the horror of skyrocketing energy prices, The Guardian's front page is keeping an eye on Zaporizhia and this nuclear plant. And it's an element of the war that I just find absolutely terrifying. If this plant is allowed to fall into disrepair, if the energy isn't kept on at this plant, the implications, as Petro Cotton quoted there on the front of The Guardian, are not just for Ukraine, but for the whole world.
That's the thing, sometimes, of course, other news stories, certainly in my local area, can take over proceedings, and that's very much the case this week for us particularly. It's 6 months now of this conflict, 6 months of this invasion. And of course, it will occasionally slide down the news agenda as other things happen domestically. But I think this is a reminder, this story about the nuclear plant from The Guardian, that we are all we're all in a very still remain in a place of real danger when it comes to this conflict. The story essentially is that Russia may try to disconnect Zaporizhia from the Ukraine power grid, which would be an extremely dangerous move. It could disconnect the cooling towers, which keep things stable. And it's the biggest nuclear power plant in Europe, so we don't have to be particularly tuned into that type of science to know just how dangerous that could be. We know what's happened previously in Chernobyl. So it's a reminder, isn't it, to everyone around Europe.
Indeed.